Let's talk a little about flowers. A red rose. Well, is there anything more romantic than a red rose? Maybe a diamond, but let's say you are going a little bit towards Valentine's Day. Chocolate and roses, right? So red rose has zero CO2 equivalent if you picked it from your garden and you didn't use any inorganic fertilizer, or 350 grams CO2 equivalent if it was grown in Colombia and flown by air. Uh, Valentine's Day is February 14th, winter time. Where are you going to get roses from? They often have to be flown in from somewhere. 2.5 kilograms or 5.5 pounds CO2 equivalent if you have roses grown in a heated greenhouse in Netherlands and then flown. Netherlands actually subsidizes the hot houses where things are grown for internal use and exports. Netherlands is one of the most progressive countries on climate action. Basically, because they're close to sea level and they're worried, but yet they do things like subsidizing heated greenhouses for growing stuff. So a single rose, a red rose, could have the same impact on climate change as about 5 kilos of bananas. So how bad are bananas? Well, obviously not as bad as a red rose, I guess. So if you think about Valentine's, you face what is called a Hobson's choice. You either have to put them on a plane or grow them using artificial heat. Both of these are bad news for climate change. A Hobson's choice is where you take what is there or you have nothing. So Valentine's Day you must have roses or nothing, so you have no good choice if you are in a cold country where roses are not available freely growing in the garden, right? Potatoes. Who doesn't love potatoes? 1 kilogram of boiled potatoes have a 620 grams of CO2 equivalent if they are locally grown, boiled gently with the lid on. Like the roots that we looked at, carrots, potatoes are very environmental friendly, and you could eat potatoes all year long in terms of the calories, diets, and nutrients, and so on. Well, please check. I'm not a doctor, but it jumps to 1170 grams CO2 equivalent if it is still local but boiled furiously with the lid off. Why would you do that? Well, I guess it gets done when we didn't think much about water or fuel or global warming. People probably did do that if they had a lot of time. Nonetheless, here are some ways to keep the cooking emissions to a minimum for potatoes. Use a gas stove instead of wood burning or electric. Put a lid on the pan. Boil gently. Temperature of the water and therefore cooking speed is exactly the same when you turn the gas down to a gentle simmer as when you boil at full throttle. So the amount of energy used has to be less as well. Cut the potatoes into smaller pieces, which makes it boil faster. But then if you want a boiled potato, full potato with sour cream and chives and bacon bits and so on, then obviously you don't want them in pieces. Use a pressure cooker. The pressure raises the boiling temperature, which means potatoes cook faster and more efficiently. It's like going on a mountaintop where pressure is lower, so the boiling temperature goes up, so you have to keep boiling for longer, whereas the pressure cooker acts exactly the opposite, where pressure is increased and boiling temperature is raised. When you go on a mountaintop, the pressure is lower, boiling temperature is lower, so even when the water is boiling, its temperature is not as warm as you want. Okay, it's the opposite for a pressure cooker. Okay, in terms of gram CO2 equivalent for breaking down the potato footprint, growing the potatoes is about 220 grams. Transport costs about 80 grams of CO2 equivalent. Packaging in a simple bag is 10 grams. Supermarket storage and display is 60 grams, so that adds quite a bit, almost as much as transport. Boiling, depending on how you do it, as we just saw, can cost 250 to 800 grams of CO2 equivalent, with a total ranging from 620 to 1170 for 1 kilogram or so of potatoes. Okay. Alternatively, if you're baking or roasting, you can use a microwave or convection oven. Reduce the size of the pieces, again, not always an option. Having the heated oven up, cook more than one thing, so that you don't have a big oven just cooking a potato or two, but you actually are using the energy efficiently by cooking more than one thing. Okay, what comes after potato? Obviously milk, I guess. A pint of milk has 723 grams of CO2 equivalent. We already saw that milk is environmentally as bad as it can get in terms of calories you can get from food, because like beef, cows produce milk and they are not very efficient in what they do. So if you can get through 2 pints a day in your household, that's 527 kilograms per year, as much as a return flight from San Francisco to Vancouver. So milk, to repeat ourselves, is quite environmentally expensive, high carbon footprint. If we want to see the carbon footprint of locally sourced milk in a plastic bottle at the checkout of Booth's supermarkets, in this example, the milk comes from Bowland Fresh, a local supplier, so the transport impact is low. This chart doesn't include either your journey to the shops or the refrigeration you have to do at home. Okay, so methane from the cows is a big concern, 41%, and remember this is 25 times as high, 25 times the global warming potential as carbon dioxide. There is carbon dioxide emission from the farming itself, which is 20% of the total. Nitrous oxide from farming is 22%. Nitrous oxide is, I think, almost 200 times the global warming potential of CO2. Plastic bottle is 4%. Look, remember that we are looking at CO2 equivalents, which include the global warming potential differences of these non-CO2 greenhouse gases. Okay, that's why we do CO2 equivalent, as we discussed before. Transport from farm to dairy store is just 1% here, and refrigeration in the store is 8%, and then other supermarket footprint is 4%. Plus, you have, of course, your drive or commute to the supermarket and the refrigeration at home, as we said here. So milk, we already mentioned how soy milk, oat milk, rice milk and other things can be much less environmentally harmful, but soy is now often blamed for deforestation, and some vegans are upset because vegans who consume lots of soy and soy products are often blamed for the deforestation. But the truth is that the deforestation drive to grow soy actually doesn't come from human consumption of food. It comes from soy being used in large quantities for feeding chicken and cattle. Okay, so if you look at the soy food chain, here is global soy production. Food is only 6%, out of which you have tofu, soy milk and other, and the feed is 7%. 87% is processed into oil, which goes to humans, industry and animals. In the industry it goes to biodiesel and lubricants and other industrial uses, so let's say this is environmentally friendly use as well. 81% of the processed soy goes into making cakes, where humans use less than 1% of it, industry uses less than 1% of it, but 99% of the cakes coming out of processed soy is going to animal feed, poultry, pig, aquaculture, other animals, dairy, beef and companion animals. So this majority of soya use is what is driving the market for soy and the deforestation in places like Amazon, because soy is a good product that sells well, and I think China is also growing a lot of soy, but one has to look at the deforestation numbers associated with soy farming. So one has to be careful how the story is pitched to you. If somebody says soya is very environmentally unfriendly because it leads to deforestation, then you must dig deeper and see and ask questions as to what is the major use of the soya. We are saying beef and meat in general is environmentally very taxing on the system in terms of the number of calories you get from the meat. There are other health issues as well, but there are cultural practices, so let's not get into too much details of whether to consume meat or not. But given that meat consumption goes on, soya is fed to animals to produce meat, and that soya is what is driving deforestation. So just pay attention to these sorts of details. You can do a little bit of extra digging whenever you buy things like meat, whether it's grown, it's fed with soy, and how the soy is grown, and so on and so forth. But of course it depends on your choices or how you fit your 10-ton per year lifestyle in terms of driving meat versus vegetarian food, clothing, and travel, etc., airplane rides, etc. Okay.